Welcome, cherished listener, to this tranquil haven of history. Come, ease your tired minds, and allow me to weave for you stories from a bygone era. Before we embark on our exploration of the Middle Ages, I'd be delighted to learn where you're joining me from across the globe and what hour graces your day. Are you tucked snugly under blankets, ready to drift into slumber? Or perhaps unwinding with a soothing dose of history after a demanding day? If there's gentle reflections on times past bring you peace, I warmly invite you to subscribe, ensuring you never miss a tale. There's a unique magic in letting history's whispers lull you as you relax. Now picture a modest medieval hamlet awakening at the break-us of dawn. The morning air carries a crisp chill, the heavens painted with delicate hues of pink and gold. A rooster's call echoes faintly, signalling the start of a fresh day. Gradually the settlement stirs to life. Smoke curls upward from thatched cottages as families ignite fires to warm their sparse meals. The scent of burning wood blends with the earthy whiff of penned animals, cows mooing softly, pigs snuffling in their enclosures. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer punctuates the air as he tends his forge, readying himself for hours of crafting iron. These are the sights, sounds and aromas that greeted a medieval labourer each morning, a familiar fabric stitched from toil and endurance. To live as a peasant in the Middle Ages was to be ensnared in an unyielding cycle of gruelling work, overshadowed by the feudal system's heavy hand. Most dwelt in cramped, single-room dwellings, their roofs layered with straw that decayed every few years, demanding laborious renewal. Walls were crafted from wattle and daub, wooden lattices coated with a mix of clay, manure and straw. Within this one space, families cooked, slept and lived, their beds mere heaps of straw on earthen floors. Furniture was rudimentary, a wooden table, a bench, perhaps a chest for treasured items, and if fortune smiled, a straw-stuffed mattress for the parents. Children nestled on the ground or in a loft above the animals' quarters, where rising heat offered winter warmth. Their sustenance mirrored their surroundings, consisting of rough barley bread, a stew of grains and vegetables, and scant garden produce. Meat was a scarce delight, reserved for celebrations or when an animal grew too frail to serve. Even ale, a staple drink, was thin and weak, consumed more for its nourishment than taste, as water often carried contamination, especially in towns. This sparse diet, coupled with ceaseless physical strain, left most peasants malnourished, their bodies vulnerable to illness. Dysentery, typhoid, tuberculosis, and the terrifying bubonic plague, periodically sweeping Europe like a relentless reaper, claimed many lives. Consequently, life expectancy hovered at a grim threshold, with reaching 40 considered a blessing. Many children perished before age 5, falling to sickness, hunger, or mishaps, while childbirth posed a deadly risk to both mother and infant, with postpartum infections claiming numerous women. Yet, against these odds, the peasantry persevered. They laboured from sunrise to sunset, their days governed by seasonal shifts and their lord's decrees. In the feudal structure, they occupied the lowest tier, dependent on the aristocracy for the land they worked. This system wove a complex network of duties and allegiances, with the king at its pinnacle and serfs at its base, flanked by lords, dukes, earls, barons and knights who held vast lands granted by the crown. In return for these holdings, nobles pledged loyalty and military service, but the land's cultivation fell to peasants, bound to estates in a form of servitude. For the right to farm a small plot for their own survival, they toiled on the lord's fields, cared for his livestock, mended his fences, and surrendered a portion of their yield as rent, a life of endless effort with scant reward. Peasants fell into two primary categories, freemen and villains. Freemen, as their title suggests, enjoyed a touch more freedom, owning tools and animals, and occasionally amassing enough to purchase their liberty. Villains, however, lived as near slaves, tethered to the land, unable to depart without their lord's consent, owning nothing, and subject to his judgment. Should a villain die heirless, his meagre possessions reverted to the lord. Yet, regardless of status, all shared the same dawn to dusk routine. They rose to the rooster's crow or church bell's toll, ate a quick breakfast, and ventured to the fields, guiding cows to pasture, pigs to forage in woods, and sheep to hills. In spring, the plowman yoked his oxen to a sturdy wooden plough, its blade slicing deep into the soil as he trudged along lengthy furrows. The task was punishing, the sun scorching his back, flies buzzing around the sweating beasts. At each row's end, he paused to wipe his brow, then wrestled the plough around for another pass. Once the earth was turned, the sower strolled the field, dispersing seed from a sack draped over his shoulder, mindful not to sow too densely or sparsely, overcrowding choked plants, while gaps invited weeds. Hungry birds swooped to steal the grain, adding to his woes. Summer demanded vigilance over ripening crops, guarding against marauding creatures and thieves. Peasants weeded, hoed, and battled insect plagues under the blazing sun. Harvest time rallied the entire village to gather the vital grain before rains arrived. Men, women, and children wielded scythes and sickles, working from dawn to dusk to cut and bind wheat into sheaves, a race against time, as a single storm could flatten and rot the crop. Threshing followed, with flails, 2 wooden sticks linked by a chain, beating sheaves to separate grain, the rhythmic thud, 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 resonating across fields. Winnowing came next, tossing grain into the air to let the breeze carry off chaff, leaving kernels to fall. The grain was then hauled to the lord's mill for grinding, the miller claiming his share. No harvest scrap went unused. Straw thatched roofs, stuffed mattresses, or fed livestock, while gleanings left for the poor echoed biblical tradition. While men laboured in fields, women managed an endless array of chores, milking cows, churning butter, crafting cheese, baking bread, brewing ale, spinning wool, weaving cloth, sewing garments, tending gardens, gathering firewood, fetching water, and cooking meagre meals. Children, as soon as they could walk, helped by scaring birds, collecting eggs, picking vegetables, or herding geese and sheep. Even the elderly and infirm contributed, spinning, weaving, mending, or tending fires. Retirement was a foreign concept. This was the medieval peasant's lot. Unceasing work and hardship, their fates tied to land and lords. Yet, amid this struggle, some names endure. their stories testifying to the common man's spirit. One such figure was William Langland, a 14th century plowman turned poet, born into a poor family. His youth was spent gripping plough handles, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his restless mind yearned for knowledge. In rare idle moments, he absorbed the priest's sermons, memorizing biblical tales, learning to read and write, rare skills for a peasant, and crafting his own verses. Langland's masterpiece, Piers Plowmen, is a vast allegorical poem following a humble everyman, Piers, through a landscape of social injustice and religious corruption. Through Piers, Langland exposed feudal inequities, noble greed and clerical hypocrisy, voicing the peasantry's toil, poverty and longing for betterment. In one poignant passage, Piers laments his lack of wealth. No penny pullets to buy, nor geese or pigs, but 2 green cheeses, a few curds and cream, an oat cake, and 2 loaves of beans and bran for my young ones. Yet I have no salt bacon, not a trace of smoked meat in my stores. His words resonated with the common folk. Seeing Piers as their champion, the poem spread widely in manuscript form, a testament to Langland's genius, enduring over 6 centuries as a window into peasant life and a call for justice. For Langland, writing transcended his peasant confines, giving voice to the voiceless and dreaming of a fairer world. Though his later life remains obscure, his legacy persists in Piers Plowmen, reminding us that even in oppressive times, imagination and hope can soar. Shifting focus, we meet shepherds and goatherds whose lives were intertwined with the land's creatures. The shepherd's existence was solitary and demanding, spending days and nights alone with flocks, roaming hills for pasture. This role required skill and insight, reading animal needs, weather signs, and predator threats. Knowing safe plants from poisons, nursing sick lambs, or delivering difficult births. Armed with a staff and sling, shepherds defended against wolves, wild dogs, thieves, or even bears. Their only company was the flock's bleating and a herding dog's bark, with shelter limited to a crude lean-to or cave. In summer, they led sheep to high pastures following the receding snow line, where alpine grasses fattened them for winter. Autumn brought a perilous descent, navigating icy paths amid avalanche risks. Back in the valley, sheep were penned, wool shorn and spun for clothing and blankets. Winter demanded constant watch to shield flocks from cold. A hard life with deep rewards, knowing their skill sustained others with wool and meat. In quiet evenings, shepherds found solace in nature's beauty, light on grass, a lark's song, a stream's tinkle, often finding spiritual comfort, seeing echoes of the divine shepherd Christ in their work. This spiritual thread shines in the medieval carol, the shepherd's song, depicting shepherds at Christ's birth. The shepherd upon a hill he sat, he had on him his tabard and his hat, his tar box, his pipe, and his flagot. His name was called Jolly Jolly Wat, for he was a good herdsboy. An angel announces the Saviour's birth, and they hasten to Bethlehem, finding Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. For peasants, this nativity resonated deeply. God born in a stable among humble beasts, affirming their worth. Yet not all shepherds were saintly, some were rogues, stealing or neglecting flocks. Still, they were respected for their expertise, vital in an era where wool was a key commodity, earning decent wages and status. Next time you wear wool or cozy under a blanket, think of the medieval shepherd, solitary, watchful, guiding flocks through seasons, his faith a beacon in a world of labour. From pastoral hills, we descend to the medieval city's dim, narrow streets, where overhanging timber frames cast shadows. As dawn's first light pierced village thatch, peasants roused from sleep. Roosters crowed, heralding another laborious day. Men, women, and children rose from straw mattresses, their breath visible in the cold air, eating coarse bread and weak ale to fuel their tasks. Life was harsh, lived in cramped huts with earthen floors covered in rushes to fend off dampness. A hearth fire smoked the single room, furnished with a rough table and stools, windows mere slits, shuttered against weather. Privacy was absent, families sharing space on pallets. Bound to land, subservient to lords, their fate was set at birth, tilling ancestral soil, marrying within class, passing meagre goods to offspring, born and dying in servitude. Their day followed the sun's rhythm, waking to church bells for matins, eating sparsely, then tending fields or livestock. Women fed children, collected eggs, milked cows, drew water, baked, brewed and gardened. Youngest children scared birds, gathered wood, or helped wash. Midday brought cheese, onions and bread, with watered wine or ale. Meat was rare, saved for feasts or sick animals. Evening pottage, occasionally enriched with pork or fish, ended their day. Bone weary, they slept briefly before the cycle resumed. A life of poverty and drudgery with little respite. Fieldwork, especially ploughing, was the heaviest burden. The plowmen tilled clay-rich soil behind oxen or horses from dawn to dusk, using a basic tool that scratched the earth. Adjusting depth and dodging obstacles, he managed an acre daily, a small yield for his family. Fields were strip-divided by turf banks, scattering plots across manors, lengthening his trek. The sower followed, scattering seed by hand, balancing density to avoid choking or gaps, battling birds with shouts or children's help. Weather, drought, rain, hail threatened all, making survival precarious. Harvest was critical, demanding all hands to reap wheat and barley before rains. With sickles and scythes, they cut and bound sheaves under hot, dusty conditions. Hands blistered, air choked with chaff. Sheaves weighing up to 30 pounds were hauled to threshing floors, a race against storms that could spoil grain. William Langland, born around 1332 in England's West Midlands, captured this life. From a freeholder family, he likely ploughed fields, but education at a monastery school, possibly Oxford, shaped him. In the 1360s, he wrote Piers Plowmen, blending satire and spirituality. Piers, a virtuous ploughman, reflects honest labour and Christian humility, voicing peasant struggles amid the Black Death and feudal breakdown. Langland critiqued idle nobles and corrupt clergy, offering a spiritual quest for grace through toil. His life, spent as a poor cleric in London, remains mysterious, but his poem endures, elevating peasant voices. Livestock care was equally vital, raising cattle for milk and meat, sheep for wool, pigs for bacon, chickens for eggs, and horses for draught. Shepherds guarded flocks on hills, skilled in reading signs and fending off predators with staffs and slings, sleeping under stars. Goat herds managed nimble goats on rocky terrain, while swineherds tracked pigs in forests, a dirty, stigmatized role. Johanna, a 14th century German goose girl, tended geese with skill, earning peace until accused of witchcraft amid village misfortunes. Her geese's loyalty saved her, letting her live out days in solitude. On estates, gong farmers emptied cesspits, facing disease and disdain, while ditch diggers drained land, risking caving.